For some background, we were all in our mid-20s from the Midwest. We're all females. The first of my friends was getting married, so naturally, a bunch of us went to Las Vegas for a bachelorette party. Having never been to Vegas before, we were having a blast. The story begins on our last night out. We were at a pool party this day, and one of the girls, Brittany, got completely plastered. She had to be taken home and be put to bed, so she didn't make it out that night. We actually had 2 rooms on 2 different floors, one on like the 16th floor and one on the 6th floor. She stayed in the room on the 6th floor. There was a DJ playing a show at our hotel that night, and it was decided we will go there for convenience. The maid of honor was one of those people that knew everyone one way or another, and an old friend was a promoter for this club. He was able to not only get us in for free, but get us a table with free bottle service. We all thought this was the most amazing thing ever and took advantage of free drinks. As many of you know, Vegas is expensive. One of the girls, Danielle, and I go to the bathroom, and by the time we make it back to the table, our party has been dispersed. The bouncer dropped us like a hot potato and told us, "This isn't your table anymore. Someone bought it." We were bummed because not only did we have to go to the general peasant area, but we were now all split up. Everyone was drunk and not really responding to text, and it was way too loud to call. Hoping the rest of the girls were together, me and Danielle stayed and enjoyed the concert until around 2 a.m. before walking back to our rooms. She was staying in the 6th floor room, and I was on the 16th. We split up on the elevator to go to our separate rooms, but mine was already occupied by the 4 other girls, all passed out. I called Danielle and told her I was coming down, but she warned me that Megan was in the room crying hysterically and not sure what happened. As I get down to their room, we learn the truth. Still one of the scariest things to happen to someone I know. As told by Megan, I was enjoying the concert until I got split up from everyone. I decided to walk back to the room as I was tired. I got on the elevator with several people, and I was the only one that got off on my floor, or so I thought. I walked to the end of the hallway, and as I put my keycard in the door, a man comes sprinting down the hall and tackles me into the room. The door shuts behind us. He climbed on top of me and punched me in the face several times, trying to knock me out. All of a sudden, Brittany, who was asleep in the room, wakes up and freaks out. She gets up and starts kicking the man. He thought Megan was alone, so he naturally freaked out and ran out of the room. Her blood was all over the wall when I got to the room. Hotel security came and then said something that gave me the chills. We were able to watch him on our cameras follow you the whole way through the casino and on the elevator. He got out pretending to go the opposite direction just until you opened your room door, then he charged. The whole time you were walking, he was just behind you, watching you like a hawk. It definitely seemed like he knew what he was doing. Thank God for my other friend not making it out that night, because Megan truly could have been alone and trapped in the hotel room with that creepy guy. Also, the police never did find him. Number 2. My first visit to Vegas was when I was 20 during a friend's 21st birthday party. I wasn't old enough to drink, so I had to find other means of trying to catch up with my friends. I became obsessed with trying to get one of those fat Tuesday-long bottleneck slushy drinks, and kept asking everyone who had one where they were getting them. This one guy dressed up in a costume and passing out flyers said he knew a place we could get one for cheap, and then we exchanged numbers, saying he would take me to get one when he was done working. He calls me and we meet up at my hotel room. At this time, I was heavily intoxicated from drinking in my room and left without saying where I was going. He told me we had to go off the strip to get the cheapest drinks and put us on a bus. The bus ride was so long and I started to sober up. It started to get dark out, and when we reached our stop, there was no one around, just a bunch of abandoned buildings. I mentioned how desolate it was, and he said everyone was inside these bars, but there was no signs of any life at all. Red flags start flying off, and I start to realize that I'm in a horrible position. I get a small stroke of luck as he tells me he needs to urinate around the corner and for me to wait on him. As soon as he turned around the corner, I run as fast as I could back to the bus and get on as it was leaving the station. It was a double-decker bus. I find a seat on top and start to feel at ease. As I'm on the bus thinking I'm safe now, I see him come up the stairs and my heart drops. He sits right next to me and then goes, "What happened? Why'd you leave?" I told him I felt uncomfortable and my friends were wondering where I was. Thankfully, my phone went off and my friends were calling me asking me where I was, and as I started to give the details, he got off at the next stop. He stared at me through the window, and that was the last time I gave my number to a stranger. Number 3. So this happened to me a few years ago when I was 15. My family and I had lived in Las Vegas and were going on what my parents called a staycation. Basically just a vacation, but without leaving the town itself. We had been staying at the Circus Hotel, which is connected to this indoor amusement park called the Adventure Dome. Now that the context is out of the way, let's get to the actual story. While we were there, I became motion sick, so I went up to the hotel room to lay down until I felt a little better, as well as taking some Pepto-Bismol. I stayed there for around half an hour just for safe measure. Usually I would carry my phone with me so that if I encountered any awkward or unnerving situations, I could simply pull out my phone and pretend to be on a phone call. This time, however, I left it in the room along with anything else that may potentially fall out on a ride. Once I left the room, I quickly checked the hallway to see if anyone was in it, and there was a man sitting outside one of the doors, seemingly on a call. This also happened to be the direction of the elevator. As I began walking towards the elevator, he noticed me, got up, and began walking towards me. He started asking me things like, "Hey, are you from around here?" and "Who are you with?" Now, I'm extremely awkward with people and always have been, so I kept attempting to end the conversation to get him to go away with simple one-word responses, which he completely ignored. He then asked me if I'd like to go have some fun with him in his room. I was 15 and I looked possibly even younger, which was what made it a bit more unnerving in the first place since he looked to be around in his 40s. I said that I was in a rush to meet up with my family for lunch and I needed to hurry, so no. Yet the rest of the way to the elevator, and while waiting for it, he kept trying to convince me to go with him. Luckily, he at least let me be when the elevator arrived and I got on. Thank goodness there were others on it, or this may have ended a bit differently. Long story short, none of us were allowed by ourselves for the remainder of the trip. I told my parents about the whole encounter once I got downstairs, and my father was pissed, as well as my mother. The rest of the trip went well and we didn't see him again, but still, if you're young or have no defense, be careful when walking alone. I don't really know if this was actually creepy or if it's just the anxiety talking, nor what his intents were. But either way, at the time, this was creepy as hell for me. Number 4. This happened a few years back, and I was traveling with a close friend and my boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband. Long story short, her boyfriend was supposed to come with us as well, but they ended up breaking up a week before the trip, so it ended up just being the 3 of us. Anyways, being from the east side of the country and having never been to Vegas before, we wanted to be sure to see all of the sights. We went to a number of casinos, restaurants, pools, saw the Blue Man Group, went to the Hoover Dam, etc. One thing that friends had told us we had to check out while we were there on the trip was Old Vegas. We were told it was super cool and had this awesome light show at night. We'd looked it up in the travel books and had heard a lot of good things about it. At this point, we had been in Vegas for at least a couple of days already, so we were getting used to the idea that no one ever seems to sleep. And so we could make the most of our trip, we usually stayed up and stayed out pretty late as well. So when we ventured over to Old Vegas kind of late at night, we were thinking it would be like the Strip, lit up and busy at all hours of the night. Well, we were wrong. We arrived at around 1 a.m. in what turned out to be an extremely shady area dressed to the nines. My friend and I in nice cocktail dresses, and my boyfriend in dress pants and shoes and a dress shirt, and our white convertible rental car. Needless to say, we stood out. As soon as we neared the entrance for the main drag, I started to feel uneasy. It wasn't half as lit up as I thought it should be, and the streets looked kind of deserted. Also, the people who were on the streets didn't look like tourists. I swear I saw a guy walking down the street trying door handles on each parked car he passed on the street. After seeing this, I told my boyfriend that I didn't feel safe here and we probably shouldn't park on the street. Honestly, I was feeling kind of apprehensive about being there at all and would have preferred to go back to the strip, but we were already here and both him and my friend still wanted to check it out. Luckily, there was a casino with a parking garage near where we were. So we ended up parking there and walking through the casino before making our way down to the street to the main street. However, as we walked through the casino, I noticed that virtually everyone in the casino was male and none of them looked like tourists. They were all practically staring a hole in our backs. My friend and I are both attractive women, and the combination of this and how we were dressed made us stick out like a sore thumb. After making our way out of the casino and over to the main street, we noticed that none of the cool lights we had been told about that make up the overhead light show were lit up. There were bums on the street asking us for money and few very other tourists. We made it to what looked to be one of the most lit up casinos on the street. My boyfriend really wanted to play $2 blackjack, which he'd heard could be found here. I was just happy to be inside and away from the deserted, creepy street, and I figured we'd be fine as long as we stayed inside the casino. Turns out that wasn't quite the case. We walk up to a blackjack table and almost instantly get the attention of this weird guy. It's been several years since this happened, so I can't even remember exactly what he looked like anymore. But he wasn't a small guy. He was probably taller and definitely bigger than my boyfriend, and he didn't look like he was all there. He kind of tried to strike up a conversation with my friend and I as we stood up by the blackjack table, but nothing he said was making any sense. He would just mumble a weird sentence or two and maybe give us an awkward compliment, then just kept standing there by us watching the activity at the table. We tried to be polite but tried to avoid giving him too much attention, as we didn't want him to think that we wanted to engage in his conversation. After standing at the table for a while, the three of us moved on to the next table. We figured we'd lose the guy and sit down and actually get to play some blackjack. However, he followed us right over to the next table where he proceeded to stand very close by to my friend and I and continued mumbling very weird things that we didn't understand. The only thing I made out that I could remember is he kept telling us his uncle owned the casino or something, which was most likely not true at all. This continued for a while. We would stand at a table for a while and watch, and just when we thought he was distracted enough by what was going on at the table, we would move on to another table. But yet, he continued to follow us and not at all inconspicuously. In fact, he started getting strangely aggressive. Now, as we stopped at each table, he would catch up to us, walk up awkwardly close to my boyfriend, cross his arms, and try to stare him down. We would then move, go to another table, and the whole thing would happen again. The casino we were in again wasn't that huge, but the main walkway was essentially a big loop. We made it around the loop twice, stopping at various intervals and trying to act nonchalant before we saw a security guard. My boyfriend was able to flag him down and tell him what was going on, and the guard began to talk to the guy while we booked it out of the casino and back to our car. We got back to the car and back to the strip in one piece and without further incident. We never did get to play blackjack in Old Vegas or see the light show, but after that, we didn't really have a desire to go back for the remainder of our trip. But can you really blame us? Number 5. My grandparents' job required them to travel across the United States in a large truck with a trailer. I traveled with them a lot and was homeschooled on the road. We lived in hotels, ate at fast food restaurants, diners, and truck stops. While most adults would probably love to travel for free and see beautiful locations like California, Nevada, Colorado, Texas, etc., I was a young girl and wanted to stay back home with my friends and family. But of course, it wasn't my decision. What my parents wouldn't understand is that as a developing child, I would be in many dangerous situations due to being in unfamiliar cities with sketchy characters. The following story happened in Nevada when I was 12 years old. After about 12 hours of being on the road with my grandparents, we finally arrived to Las Vegas for the first of our 5-night stay. In order to save some money to account for the last-minute guest, me, we stayed in a cheap hotel in the not best part of town a little outside of the city. It would have been cheaper to stay there, but the hotel had complimentary breakfast, a family-friendly guarantee, and most importantly, a pool. I had been traveling with them for not even 2 weeks, and what would happen next would set the tone for the next year I spent on the road. My new guardians and I were all down at the pool catching rays and cooling down during the 117-degree heat. I was excited to go swim and tan because it was summer, and it was a nice break from being lectured and being punished for my bad behavior, which resulted in me being sent to live with them. I was laid out on a beach chair in a small bikini working on my tan when an older woman around 40 approached me and my grandfather. She asked if there was another member of our family still in the hotel. My grandfather replied, no, my wife is the only other person here with us, and she's in the pool right there." Her face turned white, and then she replied, I don't want to alarm you, but I've noticed a man in his underwear at his window taking pictures of her and touching himself." We both darted our heads to the rooms facing the pool to see what she meant, and to my horror, I saw the skinny, disheveled man with his camera documenting my unnerved face. I could make out the satisfied smile behind the camera and saw the rapid movements of his forearm. He noticed my grandpa charging inside the hotel to find out where he was and to make sure he was dealt with. Unfortunately, he was gone before the management could check every room. It's been years since this happened, and I'm still creeped out by the idea of what he was doing with those pictures of my developing body. I sometimes wonder how dangerous he may have been. If he hadn't been discovered by the stranger at the pool, would he have approached me? I guess I'll never really know, but I'm glad I never found out. Number 6. To give a little background information about myself, I'm a 20-year-old white male, 6'2", 150 pounds, and I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. I take the bus or walk as my regular means of transportation, and I'm not the most physically intimidating or attractive guy. I've always been pretty skinny too. I like to consider myself a people person and usually love to talk to strangers and hear their stories, and at times I love to help people through whatever problem they're facing at the time. That being said, let me get to the story. It was a Friday night about 5 to 6 years ago, and I was coming home from my best friend's house a little after midnight. Most of the time coming home from his house, I would use the same routine I have for the last 7 years. Walk down the street about 1.5 miles and catch a bus that goes through the middle of the city straight to wherever I had to go. This night was a little different. I ended up drinking a little bit too much with him and had to take a different route. No big deal, right? Well, I walked down a back street to the bus stop I had to get to, and I noticed a purple/blue Chevy Blazer parked on the side of the road with a fat man sitting in it staring at me. It creeps me out a bit, but I ignore it and keep walking. I make it to the bus stop no problems and sit on a conveniently placed pile of large rocks at the top of the bus stop and wait for the bus to arrive. I checked the bus schedule and saw that I had just over a 30-minute wait. I light a cigarette and just stare at the traffic as I wait for the bus. Nothing happens until about 7 or 8 minutes before the bus was scheduled to arrive, and out of nowhere a purple/blue Blazer pulls up next to the stop and the passenger window rolls down. Sitting in the car, a fat, late 30s to mid 40s Hispanic male starts trying to talk to me. I stood up to get a better look at the guy, and I notice he's wearing something that looks like a police uniform, complete with a badge and utility belt. Keywords, looks like one. The color of khaki was far too light to be a police officer, at least in the jurisdiction I was in at the time. He shined a flashlight into my eyes as I talked to him and announced that he was an officer of the law, and looked at his watch and told me that the bus didn't come this late, and he instructed me to get in the car and he'd give me a ride. I instantly knew something was wrong here, and my first thoughts were John Wayne Gacy. I knew I needed to get out of here, and get out of here fast. Now, I've gotten stuck in some terrible neighborhoods, ones that someone like myself would be lucky to get out of alive before, and I've had police officers pull me over to inform me where I was and that I should get out quickly, even begging them for rides once they cut me loose, and they've told me no. Cops only give you a ride to jail, and I knew that. I get really nervous and the nope center of my brain goes off and start trying to say, "That's okay, I'll be fine, I don't need a ride," and so on. I mean, the way this guy was talking and acting really made my skin crawl. Luckily for me, the bus pulled up behind him and I ran onto the bus to get away. As I got on the bus, I tried to memorize his license plate numbers, but he had it covered by some type of cloth, and next to the license plate read a sticker that said, "I break for animals." I don't know why, but that really creeped me out even further. Nothing else happened that night, but 3 days later while drinking my morning coffee, I saw on the local news that a fat white male in his 40s was abducting young men, driving them to the middle of the desert and then raping them, and then leaving them at large for 3 years, and he got caught cruising around the day after my encounter with him. I'm very fortunate that I wasn't his next victim. Thank God for that. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you have your own personal scary story, be sure to submit that to my subreddit at reddit.com/r/southerncannibal or to my email at southerncannibal@gmail.com. I'm always looking for new stories. And before we bring this video to a close, I just want to shout out all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 or more patrons featured on screen. Shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Celeste S, Ellie S, Emily W, Heather B, Howard R, Jacqueline W, Jazzy G, Jonathan C, Lori J, Matthew B, Michael G, Random Randy, Steph L, Tammy S, and Terry H. Thank all of you so much for supporting me on Patreon. I really appreciate it more than you know. And if any of you would like to join these awesome people and also become a patron, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thank you everyone, and have a good one. And remember to always stay on.